I'm Charlie McKenna with Lillie's Q, and we're here today and we're going to show you how to trim a brisket, right? Get a lot of questions about trimming brisket, get a lot of questions about brisket in general. This is going to be a nice trim video for you. We're going to show you how we do it at the restaurant, how I do it at home when I cook at home for my friends and family. So the idea is that we are trying to trim the meat to give us the best possible end product. Some of you will see this, we'll take a decent amount of some of this meat off, and the reason why is because we can use that for other purposes to make more money than we can leaving it on the brisket and just kind of burning up while it cooks because it's too thin on one side of the flat, let's say, right? So you got this beautiful prime brisket here, right? Got a beautiful fat cap on top. Then you flip it over here, it's got this like fat heel here, and then a little bit of fat on the lean meat here, but obviously we gotta get it out of this cryovac first. Easiest way I think to do that is split right on the fat, right? Because then you don't go into any piece of lean meat, right? You kind of like pull that plastic up, then I kind of like just trim that back a little bit, trim this back. So we've got this plastic open. I like to get the brisket out of the plastic and leave the plastic down on the ground. Mainly I'm just trying to get the brisket out of any liquid that might be in there. Luckily this one doesn't have too much, right? So my idea is I like to start on the back of the brisket. This is actually the top or the presentation side of the brisket, so I will do that next. But my first move is kind of on this back side, right? And you can see this big heel, and then you got this fat right here, and you got a little bit of fat down here. Got some weird hangings over here. So I'll show you how to clean this up. First thing is, you know, anything hanging or like just thinging it off, I'll kind of trim off. I got a pan next to me where I'll take all my meat trimmings and all the fat and set it aside, because we'll use the fat to render down for brisket fat, as well as we'll take all the lean meat and we'll use that for other products. Like you can grind up the brisket trim. It's great for burgers. It's great for meatloaf. It's great for any of those type of ground meat. Sausages. If you put any type of beef product into your sausage, it's really good because it's got a decent amount of fat content into it. This is going to get trimmed off when I do my trimming of the front brisket. I like to take some of all this fat here off. It's a little bit too much. You can see it's pretty deep. So what I do is I'll kind of start at the top here and curve around the fat and kind of go in to that piece, and hopefully I'll take some off. Like, I'm not trying to get into the lean meat, I'm just trying to take some of this fat that's way too much and can't render off all the way through the cook process. Now, we got this fat here, right here on top, so I'll get under that a little bit, slowly. You can see I'm kind of tilting my knife up towards the sky, and I'm kind of going with the grain of the meat so that it's as smooth as possible, and I'm kind of going away from my body so that if it slips through it all, I don't like cut myself. You can see we got down pretty nice right there, and I'll put that tip underneath, trim it out, kind of trim, making long strokes, right? You want to keep the knife moving as much as possible when you're trimming the brisket. You don't want to saw back and forth. You kind of want to use the whole length of the knife to kind of trim from the very back to the very tip, right? That way you can get nice smooth movements over your brisket. Now this heel's kind of down, and then we got this like nice smooth. This will be great for the rub, right? So then we'll flip this thing back over. Now, first thing you like to do is obviously you got this side over here that was near the sternum where it was split off, and you got the outside edge. I like to straighten it up just a little bit. So I will take back where this starts to bend here, I'll start to just kind of like take a very thin layer off the outside. Now you can see this side of the brisket's very thin. That's gonna burn up when we cook, so I'll show you what we do when we take that off. But I will take a little bit of it off now, just so I can straighten it up, because when I go to make my like curve cut, I like to have it nice and straight. The brisket, sometimes they'll have this flap on top that comes up, but you can see this one's a little bit smaller, right? And it's got this little thing. All this stuff will burn up while you cook. So the idea is I want to use the natural motion and the shape of the brisket to my advantage. So what I do is I'll take that mohawk, let's call it, and I just kind of trim it all the way down and kind of take it off. Now I'll use this to help pull as I go along the fat that's on the top of the brisket. We want this brisket to be basically as aerodynamic as possible so that the airflow when it's in the cooker is going over it nice and smooth, right? So I'll continue to move this around and take off more and more of the fat until I get to where I think the fat is like right above the meat at the thickness I want. Now the key is when you're trimming brisket and brisket fat, one, the colder the brisket is, the easier the fat's gonna be to cut, because as it warms up, it gets really soft and makes it harder to make nice, smooth cuts. But if you have a sharp knife and you really trim it down, you can really go through the fat and start to like really shape it up so that it gets down to that layer and like nice smoothness and thickness that you want for your brisket. What I normally like to do is I kind of like to trace out with the tip of my knife through the fat, kind of where I'm going on this brisket, right? And get this nice smooth piece. And you can see that I have this like nice little knife mark, and I kind of get the feeling of where I'm trying to go with the brisket, right? I'll start this trim. And then once I kind of start the motion on that path, I kind of just stay on that path with my knife moving nice and smoothly and shaping it up in one thing. Now, you definitely haven't probably gone through the whole entire piece. So that piece is hanging. I'll put my fingers here, pull it apart, right? Like this. Then you can actually see what's left to go through, and you can make a nice, smooth cut right around like that, right? Obviously you have this piece that you've just taken off, right? All this meat can be used for, like I said, burgers and ground up, or you can use it for other things, trimmings and whatnot. Now we're just gonna make sure that like our fat is as thin as we want it to be. I like to try to get my fat as close to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on top. That's to help protect the flat as much as possible. Then you can start grabbing this fat and just kind of like tilting your knife still towards the sky a little bit and shaving the fat off. And if you get a piece where you can grab onto it, and then you can start to peel it a little bit more. You got this nice, beautiful flat that's still covered with, you know, a little bit of fat on top, and then we have the fat going back that's curved around the point, and we can use this to cook it. Now, when I'm cooking this piece of meat, this is the ideal place right here that I'm gonna temp the brisket at, right in the middle, right? That gives me a medium thickness, not as thin as the flat, not as thick as the point, and it gives me a nice place to recognize where I need to put my thermometer from the side in or whatever. But we have this nice and smooth, so the next step would be to slather this and start to season it as we go to put it in the smoker. But you can see here, we got a nice, beautifully trimmed brisket, nicely shaped for the smoker to go in. It's got the nice fat layer on top, and we have this here ready to go. So here's your trimmed brisket. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Thanks so much.